So the end of that discussion is the perfect segue into this discussion. The first statewide Latino elected official in the state of Georgia happens to be the insurance commissioner in the state of Georgia. All right, hey guys. Hello. So thank you all very much for being here, and to round us out today, he has gotten to be a good friend. Deeply admire him, his work in the military, and also as the insurance commissioner in the state of Georgia and our first statewide elected Latino official. He was appointed to the position by Brian Kemp into the insurance commissioner's office, in large part because the insurance commissioner got elected and promptly went off to jail. You needed somebody there to fill the role. So Kemp brought him in from law enforcement, and we've now got him as our insurance commissioner. He just won statewide here in Georgia. He is my friend John King.
Thank you,
Thank
Erick.
you, sir.
Thank you.
So I do have to start with your wild ride into elected politics.
Yes.
So Georgia has an insurance commissioner that's elected statewide. We go through an election. The insurance commissioner gets elected, promptly gets indicted, has to be removed from his position. We need an insurance commissioner, and the governor turns to you, a police chief.
That is correct. I applied to be the head of the Georgia Army National Guard. And so I applied, being a career military officer. I started as a private in the Georgia Army National Guard and retired as a major general in our Army. And I applied, thank you so much. I applied to be the adjutant general, but my best friend got the job. And so I went home to be back to being the chief of police at Doraville. I started with the Atlanta Police Department with my first job in law enforcement. And then I went back, and the governor called me and says, hey, I want you to be the insurance commissioner. I said, Governor, I don't know anything about insurance. And I think he was ready for that. He said, well, we've had a lot of people that knew a lot about insurance, and it hasn't worked out really well for us. So I've now been your insurance commissioner and revamped that office, and it's one of the best offices in state government. Why? Because I'm not an insurance guy. And we've revamped it. The fact that other people are willing to move, ask for work from one agency to come to work for us for no additional pay is an indicator of the kind of operation that we're running.
So let's talk about it, because you weren't an insurance guy, and we've had now a couple of insurance commissioners who have had all sorts of legal problems on the criminal side of the law, not the civil side of the law. You come in, you clean up the office, and yet you're also now having to deal with things like, you were the first person who put it on my radar that we're starting to have businesses in the state of Georgia that are losing insurance because tort reform hasn't happened, and lawsuits have gotten out of control.
Oh, absolutely, Erick. And I think the first thing we have to kind of make clear is that when we use terms like tort, most people have no idea what the word tort means. In Spanish, it means torta, sandwich. And so that tells you how nebulous that is. And so we have to add clarity to this topic. Is unfair legal practices that are harming every Georgia consumer, every business in this climate. And I've been sitting here, I was here yesterday and today and listening to a lot of the speakers. One of the things that most people don't know is the amount of money coming from China to finance litigation, to stymie, because the investments of these companies invest in litigation financing, and the rate of return for them is incredibly high. Oh, by the way, they're paralyzing our legal system. And of course, the plaintiff is the last person that gets paid. These investment companies have an interest in increasing the amount of litigation. It's hurting not only our state, but it's hurting our nation.
Yeah, now, I want to talk to you about your military career, because you're in the National Guard, and what people may not realize, particularly if they're not from Georgia, is that during COVID, you were going all around the country, helping states set up for COVID, helping with the supply chain here in Georgia. You get into this position to be the insurance commissioner, know nothing about it, and then suddenly you're pulled out of that back into the military to help with a national pandemic.
It's fascinating. I am an armor officer, so and so that's my background. But nobody does a better job at scaling up an operation better than the military. And so when COVID happened, the governor asked me to serve as the logistics, lead of that task force. And how do we make sure that we keep our stores, our businesses running in the middle of this pandemic? Well, then the military recalls me back to bring military doctors and nurses and plug them into hospital systems across the nation. Started in New Orleans, went to New Jersey, New York, South Texas, and then to the Navajo Nation, and then ended up in California, making sure that we had resources from the military into the hospitals to be able to ride the wave of the pandemic.
I was fascinated by your almost jack of all trades. You go from police to insurance commissioner, back into the military, and now here you are back as insurance commissioner. And I know tort reform is a big issue that you've been advocating for as a real need in Georgia, but also there's got to be, people think of the insurance commissioner, but it's actually the insurance and fire commissioner.
Insurance and Safety Fire Commissioner. We regulate all. A building like this, all the sprinkler systems, all the plans, we approve plans for every major structure being built in Georgia. We also approve elevators. So if you don't see my name on the elevator, take the stairs. That's my message for all of y'all.
But I mean, it's an unwieldy position. But also you have the direct ability to impede, stymie, or benefit businesses through the regulations of your office. How do you balance the public safety and the public economic factors?
It is not as hard as people would think. A lot of insurance commissioners only 11 insurance commissioners across the nation are elected. The rest of them are appointed by their governors. And many times they take the policy positions of a lot of the governors. I don't see the business industry as my enemy. That's the foundation of this. I have a responsibility for public safety and for the safety of Georgians. This is the same role that I took as a young policeman walking a footbeat in downtown Atlanta. Chief of police at Doraville. This is my primary, is making sure, but we don't sacrifice safety and also throw all these obstacles to business communities that are trying to improve our lives. And so I am elected to be the consumer advocate, but I can't wreck the industry in the process.
Okay, you mentioned the police. That reminds me, did you not tell me when you were a beat officer in Atlanta, you used to have to escort Coretta Scott King?
I did.
Yes.
I did. One of my jobs working what they used to call high crime foot patrol on Auburn Avenue at night. One of my jobs was to walk Coretta Scott King. And if anybody should have had a hard time with a young white cop, although I grew up in Mexico, so I didn't know the background and all the tension, she was very kind to me. She really brought in this idea that it wasn't the chief of police's job, it wasn't the lieutenant, it wasn't the captain's job for the safety of that beat. It was John King. It was my job, and I couldn't delegate that responsibility for the safety of my community on anyone. And that stayed with me, and that's how I see my role today.
Now, I just, as an aside, have to say it's kind of wild to me that of all people, Dr. King's wife needed a police escort at night on Auburn Avenue, and it should have been the safest person in the area, and yet that tells you something about the neighborhood you were serving in.
Atlanta can be a rough. There's some parts of Atlanta that kind of be rough, but we had the support of the community. And today, that's the major challenge: is police officers are conflicted. Does this community have my back? And that's what we worked very hard in Doraville to make sure that there was never a doubt in my police officer's mind that when something bad happened, as long as you were applying good tactics, good lawful processes, that the community was going to have your back. The lack of clarity today is making a lot of police officers hesitant to do their job.
Now, I have to ask you a personal question because I have a great connection with my audience, and I can just feel it in people's minds. How is a man named John King Georgia's first Latino official?
Well, it's fascinating. My father's from South Georgia, from Berrien County, Nashville, Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Down yonder. And he did not want to be a tobacco farmer. He went off to Savannah, Georgia, before World War II started, and joined the Merchant Marine. Sailed all over the world as a Merchant Marine sailor during the war. An incredible hero. I mean, he was sunk 5 times doing the convoys to Europe to support our allies. Came after his career, he decided to retire and went to live in Mexico. Married my mom, and I was born and raised there, and grew up, private Catholic school. At age 17 and a half, decided that it was time for me to learn how to speak English and come to American schools. Of course, of all the places of bringing me to Albany, Georgia, probably was not. And so a lot of people hear the accent and they think, he sounds Cajun, or he's not. And especially you being from Louisiana, you would notice the difference. But it's Spanish and Southern rolled together. This is a great, Georgia, especially the metro Atlanta area, is a fantastic place where we have, Doraville, we had 17 languages spoken on our streets. Problems that no other agency could even imagine, but some great opportunities. People come to this country for that opportunity. The fact that I started as a private in the Georgia Army National Guard and retired as a 2-star general, that doesn't happen anywhere. That wouldn't even be possible in Mexico, in the country I was born in. Only in America is that possible. And that's why I'm so in debt to this country for this opportunity. And I've led some of the best young men and women in combat. And I carried that responsibility for the ones that I've lost in combat and for the ones that have been hurt that I brought back. That's why I can never fail them. If you worry, this insurance commissioner is not going to get cross-eyed and end up like the other ones, because I'm unwilling to look at young veterans that I've led in combat and let them down.
So I just, for your next campaign, your signs probably need to say "Hola, y'all" and be the perfect blending.
I will tell you, we hear a lot about Latino voters, and the governor was incredibly helpful. I did all his ads in Spanish on Spanish-speaking radio. We were able to move Latino voters for about 27% on his first election to about 44%. Mm-hmm. This is an incredible opportunity, and I think but there's some challenges here. The Democrats translate their message into Spanish, and they think that's Latino engagement. No, that's pandering. You cannot parachute into the Latino community a month prior to an election and says, here, vote for us. We don't own this vote. We have a great message, freedom, family, worshiping, God. Those are components that resonate. We don't own that vote, but we have to go earn it. And it can be earned if we engage and spend time and money in that community. And that the margins being so tight in Georgia, we better pay attention to that, or we're going to lose an opportunity.
It's interesting you say that. A friend of mine who's a Democratic pollster, who everybody would know, said that his concern with immigration in this country, he's for it. He supports amnesty, he supports everything the Democrats say. He says, but the problem is, I know the data, that by the third generation, a Hispanic family in this country identifies not as Hispanic, but as American. And because they identify as American, they tend to identify as Republican, and that it's actually a danger for the Democrats long term.
The whole nonsense of being called Latinx, you mentioned it yesterday. Nothing drives me and fellow Latinos crazier than being relegated to an X. That is just insane. But God bless them Democrats. They keep on digging that hole. And I encourage them to continue digging that hole. But we have to go and treat, these are Americans, the American values. That's why they come to this country and want to raise families. They've been part of our Georgia landscape since the Olympics. They helped build Georgia. And we have to be serious about engaging in the core issues. Less government. All those things that resonate to every other red-blooded American resonate in the Latino community. Democrats love to put people in boxes. I had a national media reporter come to me and challenge me. He said, there's no way you're Mexican. Okay, está bien. Vamos a hablar sobre qué vamos a hablar. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to prove that I can fit in their box. My job is to be part of a very strong team led by Brian Kemp and with some great partners that we're bringing good governance and really fighting against the federal bureaucracy that wants to keep all this power. We're dealing with health insurance reform. We're pulling out of the Affordable Care Act in Georgia this November. We have a much We have a Georgia Access that is getting people insured with private health insurance, with companies competing for that. That is how we get people covered with insurance instead of using Grady Hospital or hospitals' emergency rooms. That's how we bring good value government, governing to our communities, because the federal government is incapable of doing that. And so I hear a lot of the speakers. The states have to take more responsibility and get that control out of Washington, D.C. We have to make sure that we support folks that are willing to enable. You know, if we fail in Georgia, you toss my butt out of office. That is the price for failure. Who has ever been fired in the federal government for failing a major program? There's no accountability. I come from the world of accountability. In the military, if a commander's not effective, you get relieved. I don't want to, now if you can become vice president candidate if you get out of a deployment, but that's probably a topic for another. That's probably a topic for another day.
Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that issue. I asked Captain Brown yesterday if he wanted to comment on it, and I don't pre-screen questions, but I know he's running in a tough race. Do you have something? He's like, he served 24 years honorably. He didn't really have a comment on it, but also he did say he was going to go to Iraq, and now I guess overnight we've now discovered there was an interview he did where he said he would be going to Iraq, and then he walked away.
You know, Eric, in the military, after 42 years of service, I have seen a lot of folks that want to come and just check the block. And I don't want to make it a difference between those of us that were deployed to multiple deployments: Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Africa. Georgia National Guard kids today are serving in harm's way. And not everybody that served in the past, got an opportunity. And I'm glad they didn't have to. But when you make a deliberate decision to get out of a deployment, somebody else had to take his spot. Somebody that did not have as much time to train his soldiers to keep them alive. I think that is a disservice. And that's my only challenge. And then, of course, trying to cloak, being a military member of the military doesn't give you any magical powers to cloak yourself around the American flag. It just means that I serve. I felt the calling, and I serve with my other duty as a leader is to make sure that I did everything I could to keep my soldiers healthy and alive. He hurt his unit when he bailed out on his unit. Somebody else had to take his spot. Somebody that was not planning on deploying. They had less time to prepare his unit for combat. And I think that's a disservice. And I think he should tell the truth.
So, yes. I want to ask you about your transition to politics related to that from this angle, that you were in the police, you're a police chief, you become appointed to a position due to the indictment of someone else, and you're suddenly now in this line of fire with the press where you, by virtue of the letter next to your name, are a bad guy now in a way you weren't in the past when you were just a police officer or a police chief, that you can be vilified by a media just because of the party you're in.
It's fascinating. I mean, if you've been an Atlanta police officer walking a footbeat in the middle of the winter in downtown Atlanta, you get used to being called a lot of names. So I was actually shot on the line of duty here in Atlanta, and I'm tougher than that. I'm not going to let that. I have a limited time to get serious things done. I am incredibly glad, proud to serve alongside Governor Kemp. He's given me some tough tasks. I call myself the Swiss Army knife for the Kemp team. We're going after tough tasks, and I'm not going to let that. I have a limited time that I can serve. And I either get things done or I need to be replaced by somebody that's willing to do the task.
So let me go back to the insurance commissioner's job. I know you want to do tort reform. If the legislature comes in January, what issues do you hope that the legislature might take up that could help you?
We are in the process today. This is one of the tasks that I wanted to come and pitch to you and your audience is we have to get busy now. We have to get not legislative affairs, not the lobbyists calling their legislators. You all have to engage and hold people accountable because, the trial lawyers are formidable. they're incredible. They write lots of checks, and people get very weak kneed and very weak backs. And they all talk. They will come in during the summer. They will talk, I'm all for tort reform. And then when the time comes, well, and you start seeing the tap dancing. We have to, and the governor's given me a task to develop, to get the data, because if we keep on calling it tort reform, we're gonna miss the boat. We have to create the narrative that tells Georgia consumers that you're paying a hidden tax on every product that you buy, on every service you get. You're paying an additional tax that nobody acknowledges, because insurance companies and companies are having to pay more for insurance. It is a result of the current climate in our courtrooms. And so if we don't tell the story effectively, we're not going to be effective in changing this dynamic.
I would really like to see an end to the creep of the Florida trial lawyer billboards making their way up 75 and 95. I'd like to never see a Morgan & Morgan billboard again.
I'm glad you mentioned Mr. Morgan, one of the biggest donors to the DNC.
Yes, yep.
Guess where that money's coming from? And the problem is that we have Georgians think if they get into an accident or they get a claim that they won the lottery. And insurance was never designed to be. It was designed to make you whole and to at least get you back on your feet. It was not a lottery. And what you see on the billboards, they even scratch for the people. They scratch the people now is for the money. And they're creating this environment that you're winning a lottery. And I'm concerned, of course, our Chinese investment companies coming in and pumping money into litigation financing. That is very dangerous for our democracy.
Yeah, you've raised that, and this is a new issue for me, that they're the ones helping
Wall
fund
Street
this.
Journal has covered it very well on how a lot of the large investment companies, but nobody wants to touch it because they're terrified of the amount of money that they can generate on a campaign.
I'll tell you the story since he's come up. When Neil Bortz was in national syndication, he would talk about trial lawyers and tort reform a lot. And so Mr. Morgan would buy radio ads on those stations and then tell those stations if Bortz talked about him or trial lawyers, they needed to cut to commercial break or he would pull his advertising. And for the longest time, Bortz, particularly on WDBO in Orlando, would go out of his way to go on a tirade about him just so they would have to force to commercial break, just to make the point. But I mean,
that's leadership.
He plays with his money. He plays with his money.
Yeah. And he's not shy about it.
No, he's not. And he funds Democrats. And now I see billboards all over the state. And, I'm from Louisiana. If you ever go to Baton Rouge, it's like trial lawyer, trial lawyer, trial lawyer, trial lawyer, billboards everywhere, casino, trial lawyer, trial lawyer. It's remarkable. And having been a trial lawyer, having been a lawyer in that business, I understand sometimes people are in wrecks, there are accidents, they need a lawyer, but it does seem like it is almost an encouragement to play the lottery.
This is going to be one of the hardest tasks, I think, that Governor Kemp and our team is going to have to tackle this year. And if we don't get it done this year, I think it's going to be tougher and tougher every year as we go down the road. But we have to put it in terms that the average consumer understands what's at stake.
Do you worry about the amount of money that flows in and also the number of members of the legislature on the right who are lawyers that might be against this just because it is their income?
I walked into this job because I wasn't dreaming of being the insurance commissioner 6 years ago. I was very happy being a military officer, helping defend our nation, and being a chief of police. I got asked to do this job because I wanted to serve. And that's why I'm tackling this, because if we don't get it done by people like myself and Governor Kemp, I think it's going to be we're going to have to wait a whole different cycle to get it done.
Well, General King, thank you very much for stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Erick.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Big handout to the people that still staying in the audience.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.